Yes. So, how are you doing today? Have you enjoyed the party last night? Drinks, music? Have you enjoyed the conference at all? Let's share our respect to the organizers of this amazing event. What do I love about people here? What do I love about the conference? What do I love about everything that's happening around? It's being made because of the community. It's absolutely open. Today, I will speak about the value of the open source. My name is Ihor Dvoretskyi. I am a developer advocate for Linux Foundation, and specifically for Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It's like one of the sub-foundations under the Linux Foundation governance. And Linux Foundation is one of the largest and the largest non-commercial company in the world that is focused only on the open source. Everything, all the value that we're bringing is about open source. So first of all, we'll speak with you about the value of open source. Why open source should be important for you, why open source should be important for all of us. Open source development is really accelerating. Numbers of the open source development are really incredible. If you can imagine that there are 23 million open source developers in the world right now. There are 64 million repos on GitHub with the open source code that are completely open and available to everyone. There are 41 billion lines of code that are written every day that are added to the open source projects. Every day, 1,100 new projects appearing on the world. And all of them are releasing 10,000 new versions every day. Linux is the most popular, mostly the most significant open source project in the world. And the Linux numbers are really incredible. So for Linux as a kernel, Linux as a heart of the operating system, 4,300 contributors from 450 organizations are contributing there. 10,000 lines of code are added there every day. 2,000 lines of code are modified, and 2,500 lines of code are removed daily. And every hour, 8.5 changes are happening with the Linux release process. Linux dominates everywhere. Incredible numbers that are sharing that Linux is absolutely dominating on the supercomputer market share. It's absolutely everywhere in the supercomputer world. Almost all the mainframe customers, almost all the IBM mainframe customers are using Linux, and more than 90%. More than 90% of public cloud workloads are being driven by Linux. And Linux is also dominating in the embedded system market. So everywhere where Linux appears, it dominates. Do you know what's the most popular operating system in the world? It's Android. It's powered by Linux. I have Linux in my pocket with my Android mobile phone. I had Linux on my wrist with my Android Wear watch. I have Linux in my home with Google Wi-Fi device that's not powered by Android, but is powered also by another Linux-based distribution. The total share, the total market share in the mobile world of Linux is incredible. We are speaking only about Android, but there are several other projects like Tizen, like Jola, like Ubuntu, that has unfortunately disappeared this year. All of them are sharing these incredible numbers in the mobile world. Linux is the second in the enterprise world after the Windows Server. And none of them public clouds, they're using Linux for their workloads. Even Microsoft, because you know that Microsoft loves Linux. And the most fun fact about Linux, Chromebooks, that are laptop devices powered by Linux, by Chrome OS operating system that is based on Linux. Last year, they have been oversold MacBooks in the United States. Creating applications these days is like making a sandwich. If you're a developer, you're absolutely using open source in your everyday life. So let me show you how does it work with the sandwich concept. So you choose your framework, and it will be open source framework. For example, you use Node.js for your application. After that, you write your own custom code. It can be proprietary, it can be open source, but it's your code. And after that, to polish your application, you have to use open source libraries that are available everywhere on GitHub and other sources. Because without open source, you can't make your application successful in 2017. And even if your application is proprietary, it will consist for more than 90% from the open source code. Open source is showing the significant progress. Do you see how it grows? Do you see that in 10 years, we'll have like more than 5x times growing open source projects? It's incredible numbers. But the most important part that no single open source project can survive without ecosystem. Only ecosystem makes open source projects so successful as they are. If you have an open source project, you can move with it forward, and it becomes to be a successful product. With products, you receive your profits, and you can reinvest back your profits into the open source project. Like, how does it work today? With Linux Foundation, we have several sub-organizations, several foundations, and several projects that really dominate the market. For example, can you imagine that the biggest security organization in the world is absolutely free? You can use Let's Encrypt SSL certificates absolutely for free, and it's this organization under Linux Foundation governance. We're investing a lot into the networking world with on-IP projects, Open Daylight projects, and others. The most incredible project in our ecosystem is Kubernetes, and we'll speak a bit about that later. But we also have Cloud Foundry, completely open PaaS platform for developing applications. And we have Cloud Native Computing Foundation that currently is a home and a place for Kubernetes and other projects that are forming Kubernetes ecosystem and the entire Cloud Native ecosystem. Do you know that the most best-selling car in the United States, since 2018, it will be powered by Linux with automotive-grade Linux distribution? Toyota Camry will go to market at the first quarter of 2018, and it will be using automotive-grade Linux. Several other projects like Hyperledger for blockchain, several embedded devices for building the network infrastructure, and of course, JavaScript, Node.js, and related projects that are forming our web ecosystem. So with Linux Foundation, we have more than 800 members from 41 countries. Most of the Fortune 100 tech and telecom companies are using our partners and are using our technologies. And more than 25,000 developers are contributing code. We have more than 100 open source projects. And the market share value in money is incredible. So the next question, why I'm speaking about Linux Foundation at the Google conference. Google is one of the best companies in the world when we're speaking about the open source. Google is our big friends for Linux Foundation, and they have several projects that have really changed the world, that have been developed by Google, and they are completely open source. For example, Android, the mobile application system that is open source, has been developed by Google, and everybody may use it and contribute code there. Again, it's the most popular operating system in the world, and it's completely open source. It's Linux-based. The second incredible project that is in top 3 most fast-growing projects in the world is Chromium project. It's about Chromium browser. You may use multiple variations of the Chromium browser, for example, with Google Chrome or with other vendor distributions. The same with Chromium OS. Again, it powers Chromebooks and other several devices with their forks. It's Golang. I suppose you had a chance to listen enough talks about Golang at this conference. It's gRPC, one of the most incredible technologies in the world today. It's TensorFlow, machine learning system. AngularJS, again, a project by Google, and it's also open source. But the most important, the most popular, and the best project by Google that Google has ever made and has been open sourced. It's Kubernetes. So the story of Kubernetes is really fun. So Google has, they've been using containers since the beginning of the century for almost 20 years. And in 2014, they have decided to open source the part of the infrastructure, the part of the internal code, and share it with the world. And that's how Kubernetes project has begun. But in 2015, they understood that no single organization, no single corporation, no single unit can maintain the project with the similar scale, with the similar progress, with the similar velocity. So they came to us, they came to Linux Foundation, and proposed to donate this project to us, to find a neutral home, to find a vendor-neutral home where all the companies, all the people from the world can contribute there and receive some benefits as the developers, as the vendors, as the commercial companies, and so on. So Kubernetes, again, it's one of the most fast-growing projects in the world, but why? Because from the technical standpoint, Kubernetes makes containers running in any scale, in any environment, in any ecosystem. Containers are not enough to be alone. So if you're running containers on your own laptop, it should be enough for you not to use Kubernetes, for example. But if you have several data centers around the globe, you should use systems similar to Kubernetes. Kubernetes runs everywhere. You can run Kubernetes on your laptop. You can run Kubernetes on your several data centers in the world. You can run Kubernetes even today on the Windows machines. Kubernetes is made by Google. All the experience that has Google with the internal development, all this culture has been donated to Kubernetes as the open source project. And Kubernetes is community-driven, so people like you making this project so successful as it is. A bit about the story of Kubernetes, how this project has appeared in the market. So almost 20 years ago, the only opportunity for you to run your applications was to use the typical hardware, like classic servers, IBM servers in the data centers. But in a few years after that, VMware came to the market with their proprietary virtualization system. In a few years after that, Amazon appeared on the market with the public infrastructure platform with public cloud named AWS. Heroku was the first public and available to everyone PaaS system. So if you're a developer, you would like to deploy and develop your application, you may use it. As an alternative to proprietary Amazon, in 2010, OpenStack has appeared to the market as a completely free and open source replacement for it. And Cloud Foundry in the next year has appeared as an absolutely free alternative to Heroku. In 2013, Docker became to be so popular because of Docker. But again, coming back to the question, how can you run your containers on so huge scale? You can't do that without systems that will allow you to do that. And Kubernetes is the system that allows you to do that. So in 2015, when Kubernetes reached its first milestone, the first public 1.0 release, Cloud Native Computing Foundation has been established to make it as a house for Kubernetes in the vendor-neutral environment. And here you may notice the Kubernetes trends since the early days. So you may notice that Kubernetes wasn't so popular 3 years ago, but now it beats OpenStack, Cloud Foundry, Mesos, Docker Swarm, and other technologies at all. So Kubernetes is a Linux of the cloud. You may compare the numbers of Linux development with Kubernetes numbers. At Kubernetes community, we have more than 3,000 contributors from more than 1,000 organizations. We have almost 100,000 commits overall to the project. It's an incredible number. Every release that happens quarterly, every 3 months, we are receiving more than 3,500 commits. We have 58 GitHub repos. It was impossible to maintain all this code in a single repo, and now we have 58 repos on GitHub with 2 organizations, Kubernetes and Incubated Kubernetes. And we have 50 merged commits daily. The total number of daily commits is much bigger. We're speaking only about the merged commits here. So why does it matter for you? Because community matters for this ecosystem, because community makes it so successful as it is. This kind of not so visible graph describes how our community is built. You may see these blocks that describe what are the atomic parts of our community. We have special interest groups, we have working groups, we have committees. And this unit covers some specific area of Kubernetes ecosystem. That's why we're doing so well. When you're trying to contribute to some piece of Kubernetes, you may find the appropriate group that will help you to do that. We are open. Kubernetes community is probably one of the most open source communities in the world. We have meetings that are absolutely public. Everybody can join us. They are recorded for people who can join us exactly in this time or located in different time zones. They are live streamed on YouTube. All of our Slack channels, all of our mailing lists are open. You can join and participate in the conversations. Even our roadmap is public. But the most important that we have the open code. All the Kubernetes code is open. This graph shows how Kubernetes grows together, Kubernetes number of commits and contributors, they are growing together. So since the early days, we had almost the same number of commits and almost the same number of contributors that wasn't so big. But with every release, with every iteration of Kubernetes, you may notice that the number of commits and contributors is exponentially growing. So what is your path to be a person in the Kubernetes world? You may start as a consumer. You may start using Kubernetes. You should understand that that's exactly the technology that fits your needs, that is exactly what you're looking for. After you understand that, you may start participating in the community. You understand what can you bring back to the community, what can you do for making Kubernetes so successful as it is and making it more successful with your knowledge and with your share. Being an active participant, you're converting yourself into a contributor. You're starting contributing code, but you can be not only the code contributor. Technical writers, product managers, release managers, all the people are welcome in this community. All your knowledge and all your share is absolutely welcome. And the most successful from these people becoming to be leaders. You can be a leader of the special interest group, of the working group. You can be the leader of the entire project. And a few numbers now. So we have more than 500 Kubernetes meetups worldwide, even in Ukraine. Our best companies that are running Kubernetes, you may find them on the Wall Street, on the telecom sector, like AT&T, Verizon, the biggest telecom companies in the world, like China Mobile. They're all using Kubernetes at some scale. Our project is more successful than 99 projects on GitHub. It's really difficult to find a project that will be so successful with the same number of stars. We have 27,500 GitHub stars only for the main repo. But we are not counting 57 other repos that we have under our organization. And that is for one project. Thank you.